In today's video, we're looking at some updated NHL trade rumors with most of the information coming from a Saturday headline segment with Chris Johnson and Elliot Friedman. We're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, New York Rangers, Buffalo Sabres, and Los Angeles Kings. We're also taking a look at some updates on some pretty significant injuries we saw over the weekend, plus the fact that Alex Ovechkin is skipping the All-Star game and will face a suspension. We'll get to all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news and updates here from the weekend and Saturday headlines. So let's dive right in and get started. First of all, with Alexander Ovechkin, the Washington Capitals has already announced fairly early on here that he will not be attending this year's NHL All-Star Game. Personal health reasons, basically, is being the main driver behind his decision here, that his health and his body has to take precedence over this event, and he does not want to attend the event on account of that, which I certainly can accept and appreciate. And it's also nice to hear him make the announcement so early on as well, so that fans are not getting upset so close to the All-Star date who might have been looking forward to seeing him. So clearly he will be suspended based on the rule. There was some talk and some around the NHL wondered maybe if the NHL would be a little bit more lenient with this, but clearly a rule is a rule and he will have to face a one-game ban. Based on the rule, he can either sit out the game right before the All-Star break or the first game back, and I'm sure between he and the Capitals they can decide which game they feel is better for him to do so depending on what their schedule is. I don't have their schedule right in front of me here, so I'm not sure who the opponents are going to be, but Ovechkin can choose which game he is going to sit out. So that's unfortunate news for fans of the Caps and Ovi who's looking forward to seeing him at the All-Star game, but certainly have to understand where he's coming from with this regard. And there very well could be other NHL players who would decide to make the same decision here as we get closer to the All-Star break. Certainly injuries play a big role, and a lot of bumps and bruises, and many players would rather have the time off to rest up and get ready for the second half and remainder of the NHL season. Now, as I mentioned as well, we're going to get into some information from Saturday headlines where Chris Johnson and Elliot Friedman covered a variety of NHL trade rumors. Friedman also had some other information covered and some of the recent radio hits here as well, which kind of discusses the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's get started here with that. According to Friedman, the Leafs have several players on the trade block right now who they would like to move in an effort to build up some depth in other areas of the team. And this includes defenseman Ben Harpur, who's been playing with the Marlies, and a couple of forwards, which include Bracco and Timashov. Obviously, all three of these players are kind of considered spare parts. Of course, they got Harpur in the Ottawa trade, who came over with CC in the Zaitsev deal. He's been in their minor league affiliate pretty well the entire season, and it certainly is expendable. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder here with Ben Harpur might be a decent piece to hold on to for the playoffs. He's really big, physical. He's not afraid to drop the gloves as well. He's not the strongest, greatest defenseman out there, but he did some of his best hockey he did play was when he was with the Senators during their playoff run, where they went all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and were one goal away from going to the Stanley Cup there a few years back. He did prove to be a decent defenseman at that point. So if he could duplicate that with another team, they could certainly get themselves a bargain acquisition. But of course, the Leafs still need to address their goaltending. I know they've seen backup Michael Hutchinson get a couple of wins recently, which is nice. It's certainly important for the team to get the points. It's good for his confidence. But even though they won those games, there's certainly, I don't think they had the strongest play. Still give up too many goals, and it's really clearly not just a Hutchinson problem. It's a team defense problem as well. But at the same time, obviously they need to make some moves between backup goaltending and some defensive depth. Certainly would prove wise for the playoffs, and those are the main players that they'd be interested in moving. I'm just not sure any of those players are really going to get them a whole lot of a return. Bracco will probably have the most upside out of all. Ultimately, if they decide to keep a guy like Kasper and Kapanen longer term, it's going to box out a guy like Bracco from ever really cracking into their lineup. So I guess it might be better to move him while he's still able to get an opportunity. I mean, he's accomplished a lot at the American Hockey League level, and at this point, I do think he deserves an opportunity. He's just not going to get it with the amount of depth they have at the forward position. Now, staying with the Leafs, of course, they've got some more injuries that have certainly been piling up and helping them face a lot of adversity this year. They've battled through quite a bit. Now, fortunately for the Leafs, with all the injuries, many of the players who were their call-ups to replace these guys from the Marlies have done exceptionally well and have really built up their depth and really shown how deep this team can be, especially at the forward position. But currently, they're going to be without forward Ilya Mikheyev for an extended period of time after a very scary incident in New Jersey, after he got a skate blade on the arm, which severed some arteries and tendons and required an emergency procedure at the local hospital there. And according to his agent and the Maple Leafs, who both put out statements afterwards updating the situation, indicates he's going to be reevaluated reevaluate it in 90 days. So that's 3 months. That's a long time to recover from this injury. And if he's only going to be given an update in 90 days, how long is he going to be? Like, we have to consider the possibility here that it could end his season. I mean, that puts us basically to around the end of March, 1st of April, which is basically around the end of the regular season. And of course, if the Leafs make the playoffs, and right now they're on pace to do that and win a round or more, could he return? I guess it's possible, but it's really difficult to say exactly at what point he's going to be able to return. It's a pretty devastating injury for a player who was certainly trusted by Keefe in a lot of situations, was getting a lot of ice time, and was really having quite a nice first NHL season and a great season with the Leafs. So I guess we'll await further update later into the year on Mikheyev, but he will be out for an extended time. And they also announced that Trevor Moore is going to be out for an extended period of time, which is definite. Really, it's hard to say because he has been diagnosed with a concussion, which are very difficult to predict. So Moore's facing another injury here. Obviously, he missed time earlier in the season, so unfortunately, an injury-riddled season for him, who also was having a nice start to the year as well. And to make matters worse, we're not done there. Jake Muzzin's going to be out minimum of a week. Apparently, he has a broken foot. What they're saying is going to be listed as week to week, so he could be out for an extended time as well. Depends on how things heal. So that blue line is certainly going to be tested as well without one of their more steady defenders back there in Jake Muzzin. So I guess the Leafs are going to continue to face adversity. We'll see with all these other players that we mentioned on the block if we'll see some trades or not. But according to Elliot Friedman here, based on what they are facing with, they certainly want to add some more depth. Thankfully, the forward group is the one area that they seem to be deepest with and have the most luck with their call-ups, and these younger guys stepping in and performing very, very well. Now, of course, according to Johnston and Friedman on headlines here, the team that many of the contenders are watching is the New York Rangers. A couple of players there, of course, is one being Elias Anderson, who is quite known as on the block officially due to a trade request. But the other player that many of these teams are really interested in is forward Chris Kreider, and the Rangers haven't officially decided if he's on the trading block or not. There is some possibilities they could possibly re-sign him, although there haven't been a lot of talks about contract extension talks taking place between he and the team. So I guess we will see. Right now, all indications point to the likelihood that he would be moved. If you follow the trend of the last few years, if they've gone through this rebuild, not sure that it makes sense, depending on what he would accept, I guess, for a contract to lock up a player of his age and stature for a longer-term deal with the amount of youth that they have in their organization. But I guess at the same time, he could certainly still be a valuable piece to them, and they do need to have some veterans around. So at the end of the day, I think it really boils down to what he'd accept. The teams he's mentioned, though, as being very interested in Kreider include the Bruins, the Avalanche, the Blues, and even the Penguins, which all of these guys I think would make sense for Kreider. They all seem to be a fit to some degree. There's been mention about the Bruins before. They've got a bit of a trade history between the Bruins and Rangers. Kreider's from that local area, so that certainly makes a lot of sense for him as well. So there's certainly a good possibility that he is moved, and a contending team, apparently, according to these guys, have tons of interest, and they're just waiting to see here. Now that Taylor Hall's been traded, Chris Kreider is probably one of the next biggest names on the forward market, at least, who could face a trade by the deadline, who's going to garner the most attention and could be one of the bigger trade deadline acquisitions. So I guess we'll see what the Rangers decide to do here. Now, of course, the Friedman also goes on to mention a couple other situations. Not that there's really a lot of new information, but just that there's some more situations to keep an eye on that kind of carried over from before the roster freeze, including the Sabres still looking to move a defenseman. They got 3 veterans who are basically on the block. Not necessarily that all 3 will be moved, but I can see 1 or 2 between Bogosian, Miller, and Scandella possibly being traded. It's certainly more than likelihood there that it will happen at some point, just a matter of finding the right deal. Now, he mentioned New Jersey as a team looking for D that very well could hook up with the Sabres on a trade, so I guess we'll keep our eye on that potential situation. But as we get closer to the playoffs, those 3 veteran blue liners are certainly going to generate more and more interest for sure, because there's always teams looking for blue line help at the deadline. You can never have too many guys that are capable, especially ones that have experience. Of course, their contracts could make things a little bit more tricky depending on the team that makes the acquisition here. But the Sabres are still looking to make those trades. And he also touched on LA Kings forward Tyler Toffoli as a player to watch now, especially like Kreider, with Taylor Hall being moved. Guys like Toffoli and Kreider are right at the top of the forward group of potential trade targets for many of these contending teams. And you can't help but wonder where Arizona struck early, if we might see some other teams, possibly in the Western Conference as well, maybe make a move early to get Toffoli on their roster to try to give him more time to get acclimated with his new team, like we've seen with the Coyotes here. So Tyler Toffoli is another name, as long with Chris Kreider, the big ones in the forward group to watch here as we approach the NHL trade deadline. And all the contenders right now seem to have some interest to some degree It's just a matter of finding out where these players land. So, of course, for Kreider and Toffoli, I'd love to know what your mock trades are. Where do you see them going? What kind of package do you think it's going to take to land these players on these rosters? And which of the contenders do you think will win the sweepstakes on these trade deadline acquisitions? If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.